This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Let's just get right into it. Tonight, we're reporting on the deadly shooting spree in Atlanta that's being felt nationwide, especially by the Asian American communities targeted throughout this pandemic. Then, what those in the US should know about the virus variants wreaking havoc on Europe. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The US is now on track to see the highest number of migrants on the country's southern border in more than 20 years. Lately, there's been more kids making the journey to the US border alone. For now, the Biden administration is allowing migrants under 18 who've crossed into the US alone to remain in the country while the government decides whether they have a legal claim to asylum or residency. As of last Sunday, more than 4,000 migrant children were being held by Border Patrol. Up to 3,000 teenage boys are expected to be housed temporarily in Dallas, while Health and Human Services works to resettle them with family or in permanent shelters while they apply for asylum. Meanwhile, the head of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, is facing questions on Capitol Hill about the surge of unaccompanied minors. He didn't call it a crisis, but said it was a difficult situation they were working to fix. Some Republicans, on the other hand, were quick to point fingers.
This administration's actions have had a direct cause and effect on this humanitarian and border crisis. What was this administration and the president thinking?
The Biden White House has said it wants to create a more humane asylum system, and with the surge at the border complicating that mission, the president had this message to migrants headed to the US.
I can say quite clearly, don't come, and what we're in the process of getting set up, and it's not going to take a whole long time, is to be able to apply for asylum in place. So don't leave your town or city or community.
Folks are not trying to stay put at this point in the pandemic. The Transportation Security Administration screened more than 1 million people at airports for 6 straight days. Those are the highest travel numbers we've seen since the start of the pandemic. That, paired with spring break and states relaxing restrictions, has experts concerned about a 4th wave of infections.
We have seen footage of people enjoying spring break festivities maskless. This is all in the context of still 50,000 cases per day. I'm pleading with you for the sake of our nation's health. These should be warning signs for all of us.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is still urging people, including even people who've been vaccinated, not to travel. In the UK, it's currently illegal to travel abroad on vacation.
To my opinion, that he was acting alone. There's no indication that anyone was working with him.
Authorities have charged a man with 8 counts of murder after a shooting spree in and around the Atlanta area. He was arrested after a manhunt Tuesday night. The suspect, who is white, killed 8 people and injured several others in shootings at 3 separate spas. 6 of the 8 victims were of Asian descent, and most of the victims were women. During a press conference Wednesday, authorities said the suspect claimed responsibility and said he had a sex addiction that might have sparked the killings. It's worth noting that in the last year, there's been a sharp rise in attacks against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. The group Stop AAPI Hate has reported nearly 3,800 incidents since March of last year, and the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism reports anti-Asian hate crimes surged 150% in 2020.
Yesterday's crimes are beyond terrifying, but it just brings home to so many Asian Americans that they are fearful of their lives and circumstances where they would otherwise feel safe in their homes and at their jobs.
The impacts of this attack and others are being felt in Asian American communities across the country. Newsy's Kat Sandoval looks into how Asian American business owners are feeling in the wake of this latest attack.
For Asian American and Pacific Islander or API women, the Atlanta shooting is worrisome because it hits home. 6 of the 8 victims look like them.
Sickening, saddening, and then all of that turns into anger.
I just started crying. I thought, I can't keep my parents safe. I can't keep my community safe. I am scared.
My initial reaction was just tremendous grief. Yeah, it was painful.
Although the suspect says it's not race-related, officials are still investigating and have not ruled it a hate crime. A new report from Stop API Hate says they received nearly 3,800 hate incidents since the start of the pandemic, majority of which were women. Bakery owner Rose Nguyen says she's been on high alert.
Yes, I'm scared, but I think overall I'm angered that I have to feel this way, that I have to worry about my staff, that I have to make sure everyone has pepper spray on them.
As a reaction to the shooting Tuesday, New York City and Seattle Police Department increased patrols in their Asian American communities.
The fact that these Asian-owned businesses were targeted and that the majority of victims were Asian lets us know that there still is a threat to our safety, to our physical and mental and emotional safety that we need to address as a community.
The Asian American Federation is pushing for more community outreach instead of more policing because of fears it may create more harm for unprotected immigrant populations.
Race matters. The recognition and the visibility of the way in which Asian Americans have been racialized, the way in which Asian American women have been fetishized and objectified.
For Newsy, I'm Kat Sandoval.
A months-long conflict in northern Ethiopia has displaced millions of people. A humanitarian crisis is playing out in Tigray, a region in the northern part of Ethiopia. Civilians there have suffered because of a months-long conflict between Ethiopia's National Defense Force and a regional armed political movement. Jake Godin is here to break things down a bit. Can you explain the actors involved in this conflict and what exactly they want?
There are really two main sides that we're looking at here. On one side, there's the Ethiopian government that's led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And on the other side is the Tigray's People Liberation Front, or the TPLF. And the TPLF are the dominant power in this northern province called Tigray. The government of Ethiopia is trying to essentially eject them from power, get them out of there. The goal is to centralize government.
When exactly did this conflict begin?
Technically, it started about 5 months ago, last November, when the Ethiopian government decided to launch an offensive against the TPLF in Tigray. That had kind of been the end result of simmering relations between the federal government and TPLF. What partly sparked this offensive was the TPLF decided to hold regional parliamentary elections despite a postponement in the rest of the country. In November of 2020, the Prime Minister announced this offensive after he said the TPLF had attacked an Ethiopian military base in the Tigray region. And it's kind of turned into a guerrilla fighting type situation now. There's millions of people who live in the Tigray region. They're the ones that are mostly being affected by this. The Ethiopian government has an attempt to stifle the resistance in Tigray. There's internet disruption. Communications in that area has been severely affected. A few reports that have come out have described these kinds of atrocities where dozens of people are killed without cause. And there's videos that are going around still that are showing more atrocities. They haven't been all the way confirmed yet, but they show what appear to be Ethiopian soldiers bringing civilians to remote areas and then just firing on them, killing them. The civilians are the main ones that are being impacted by this, and it's really hard to get aid to everybody because the terrain is so difficult. Some places are very remote. There's also the fact that Doctors Without Borders has said that out of 100 hospitals they visited, 1 in 5 were occupied by military, and they said a lot of hospitals have been looted and ransacked by military groups. The problems are only going to get worse and get more and more compounded as people are forced to move from their homes into safer areas.
What is the status of the conflict and really what happens next?
Like most conflicts, the longer it gets drawn out, the more problematic it's going to become for both people on the ground and any people nearby. While the Ethiopian government says that they've jailed or killed a lot of the TPLF leaders, the TPLF says that they're not going to give up and that they are going to try and fight this as long as they can. So until one side decides to budge, it's going to continue to be a pretty bad conflict.
I'm gonna just say it. A human challenge trial sounds nuts, right? That's where volunteers are intentionally infected by COVID to study the effects of the virus and how to treat it. As wild as it sounds, those trials can push ahead treatments and vaccine development. With the coronavirus variant first found in the UK proving more infectious and increasing the likeliness of death, leading British epidemiologists believe ongoing human challenge trials could offer critical insight into which vaccine best blocks the deadlier mutant strain.
As a third wave of the COVID pandemic advances across the continent of Europe, in Italy, red zones have been introduced in regions where COVID cases are soaring, as Milan and Rome this week enter strict lockdowns. A variant is being blamed for much of the recent rise, as scientists begin to discover the grim reality of B117, a strain first detected in the English county of Kent in September.
It was anxiety-inducing.
Now Dr. Robert Challen and his team here at the University of Exeter have established that this British variant is up to twice as deadly and considerably more contagious.
We reran the analysis several times on the day we found out, just to make sure that this wasn't some mistake on our part. The biggest risk with this is actually that it's more transmissible. The more transmissibility means that we have this potential for explosive outbreaks that we've seen in the UK and beginning to see around the rest of the world.
B117 is thought to have mutated and spread during the summer when the lockdown was lifted in the UK.
More people have died in the UK per capita than in any other country in the developed world. B117 is, though, currently being blocked by the vaccines. But new variants, evolving in countries where vaccines aren't being administered as rapidly, could eventually undermine immunity in this country and the rest of the world.
We've seen that this virus can vary. New mutations can emerge.
Jonathan Ashworth is a leading British politician. He was one of the first to ring the alarm bells last January, then hugely critical of Prime Minister Boris Johnson for not acting sooner. Now, turning his attention to the future.
To be frank, there is in some ways no point in the United Kingdom vaccinating all its citizens while there is great reservoirs of this virus across the world, because all that happens is that the virus mutates, a new variant emerges which bounces back at us. So we have a responsibility, yes, to continue the vaccination of our citizens, but to work internationally as well on vaccination.
In universities across the UK, researchers are still working on the cure, even deliberately infecting volunteers with COVID-19, so-called human challenge studies, designed to discover more about the immune response and to learn which vaccine works best to help scientists predict the future.
The challenge studies will identify unique features of this virus and exactly what's going on in the host. We can really define exactly in precise details how much virus is required to induce clinical symptoms and the course of that infection over a short period of time.
Volunteers like Courtney Harmston have now been given microdoses of COVID-19 by scientists at Imperial College London, a study optimistic academics believe could eventually have a far greater benefit.
It's quite possible that we could come up with very clever ways of creating vaccines that will protect against all coronavirus infections, even those that we don't know about at the moment, because we'll be able to compare and contrast coronavirus infections. And I think once we're able to do that, I think there's some clever and creative things we can do, particularly with some of the new vaccine technologies.
As Europe vaccinates, B117 spreads, now reaching the United States, where 5,000 cases have now been recorded in 48 out of 50 states. Each mutation another roll of the dice. The hope that current vaccines will remain effective. The fear that the virus could outmaneuver the science at any time. For Newsy, I'm Luke Hanrahan in London.
When you're back, we'll go for a change of pace and break down how Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League went from just a call to action online to a soon-to-be-released 4-hour film. I'm gonna do the unpopular thing and make a confession. I liked Batfleck. And don't you dare at me on this one. He was a solid Batman, a tortured rich prick who was well-intentioned and wanted to save the world with his super friends. That's why the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League has got me so excited. Fans campaigned for this film for years and somehow willed this thing into existence. Newsy's Casey Mendoza explains the hype around the Snyder Cut.
I've never seen a being this strong. Maybe one. He's back.
Zack Snyder's Justice League, better known as the Snyder Cut, was never going to be released.
It was kind of like, I don't know if this is ever going to happen.
I thought even if it did exist, it's never going to come out.
For years, the film was a never-before-seen director's cut, a myth propelled by a global hashtag, and the fallout to the poorly received Justice League directed by Joss Whedon.
Oh, see, now that's cold. That's a betrayal.
The campaign to release the Snyder Cut included a Times Square billboard campaign during New York Comic-Con, costumed rallies in front of Warner Brothers' office, and a $500,000 donation to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
It's kind of just crazy to see how much power this specific fandom has had.
So I think it's amazing to see fans trying to get what they want, because at the end of the day, the films are for them.
In 2020, 3 years after the original film's theatrical release, Warner Brothers finally revealed the Snyder Cut was real, and it was going to be released on HBO Max.
I think this is a totally different movie by itself. This will have very little to do with what we've seen in 2017.
I have a second chance. I am not going to waste it.
The film is a 4-hour behemoth that expands the story of the 2017 film and gives more airtime to characters like Cyborg and The Flash. In this way, the Snyder Cut isn't really that different from other fan campaign directors' cuts like Richard Donner's Superman 2 or Blade Runner: The Final Cut, but what makes the film so unprecedented is the scale of the online effort and the fans' emotional allegiance to its director.
Social media has presented a really interesting narrative in this case. Specifically with Zack, though, I don't think it would ever happen again with a connection to a director like that.
The auteur architect of the DC Extended Universe originally stepped down from Justice League following the death of his daughter, and in returning to the re-release, is raising money for suicide prevention programs.
I'm just very grateful for the fact that Zack could finish the movie in his vision and the way he always wanted to, and I hope that the fans are going to love it.
They're finally getting a film that they wanted to see since the beginning.
It's iconic already. Without even watching it, it's iconic.
Keith Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
Zack Snyder's Justice League premieres on HBO Max tomorrow. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, feel free to hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. If enough of you reach out, I will hashtag release the Christian cut of ITL, where you get double the runtime and double the corniness. For the homeowners or prospective homeowners that might be watching, can you imagine putting out 10 offers on a home and having them rejected? What about 15? What about 18? The housing market is hot across the country, and prices in some places are skyrocketing, making home buying hella competitive. National reporter Bo Evans tells us about one fella whose frustration with the process led him to try something a little unorthodox.
Just beyond the picturesque mountain faces lies Bozeman, Montana. The small town has been a travel destination for decades, but now it's experiencing a real estate boom. Many of the locals are trying to make sure they're not left out in the cold on this real estate run. It's been an issue for local Sean Hawksford and his wife Jessica.
We've been trying to buy a house here really actively since August.
When they started looking for a home, Sean and Jessica were really optimistic.
We're going to make an offer, we're going to buy a house, and we're going to move in, and it'll be great.
Unfortunately, that's when things in Bozeman started exploding.
$300,000 turns into $400,000, turns into $500,000, turns into $700,000, turns into ordinary looking properties selling for nearly $1 million. The first house that we made an offer on in August has increased in value over $100,000 since we made an offer on it.
They've made a few more offers since that first one.
We made 18 offers that all got rejected that were competitive offers.
That's a tough market, but it's not just Bozeman. Zillow data shows home values are increasing in all of the largest 100 metro areas across the country. It's something realtor Mike Papantanakis has seen in Denver.
We've got a lot of buyers. We don't have a lot of houses on the market available for sale. And it makes it very difficult for buyers to be able to buy a home.
It's not just the Rockies in a housing shortage. Freddie Mac estimates there is a housing deficit of 2.5 million homes in the U.S., and that could grow. Those numbers don't look good for people like Sean and Jessica, whose changing life makes their need for a home more urgent.
As a first-time expectant dad, it just made the future seem really real. We've got a bed that we have to roll into here, and this is my wife's desk and office, and so the nursery would really have to be kind of over in our closet.
So Sean got desperate and did something a little different.
So my front sign just said, "Please sell me a home."
He made a sign out of cardboard and got on the side of the road and begged for anyone to sell him a home. People all over social media shared his picture. Mike says he's never seen anyone beg on the street for a home, but he does have advice for what buyers can do to make their offers more attractive.
Find a lender that will take you all the way through the approval process before you even start looking at the houses.
That means don't just get pre-approved, get fully approved. And have your broker ready to work for you.
The broker should call the agent that's listing the property, find out what's important to the seller. Sometimes what's important is they need to stay in the house after closing.
In the case of Sean and his growing family, this story might hopefully have a happy ending.
We just went under contract on a house last night.
They don't want to jinx it, but it looks like 19th time might be the charm for Sean, Jessica, and their soon-to-be baby boy. In Bozeman, with photojournalist Luis Ramirez, I'm Bo Evans reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more in the loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.